Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books, number 65. The first book today is The Forgotten Conservative, Rediscovering Grover Cleveland by John M. Pafford, 2013. This is an outstanding book. Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and 24th U.S. president. Very strange. He's considered two presidents, all these only one person. He was born in 1837, died in 1908, was elected in 1884 and 1892, and served in the Oval Office from 1885 to 1889 and from 1893 to 1897. He won the popular vote for president three times in 1884, 1888, and 1892. So he was defeated, but in 1888 he lost in the Electoral College. So he lost the election, therefore, in his re-election. Cleveland was one of two Democratic presidents. Woodrow Wilson was the other, between 1861 and 1933. Yes, so because of the Civil War, the Republican Party was really dominant during those years. Grover Cleveland was pro-business. He was against high tariffs. He was in favor of free silver. He was against free silver, inflation, and imperialism. He was a conservative icon who believed in honesty, self-reliance, and integrity. He fought corruption and patronage. His second vice president was Adlai Stevenson, the grandfather of Adlai Stevenson, who was the Democratic presidential nominee in 1952 and 1956. Lost both times against Dwight Eisenhower. Grover Cleveland was born in Caldwell, New Jersey. His father was a Presbyterian minister. He was the fifth of 9 children and grew up in Fayetteville, New York. Cleveland settled in Buffalo and became a lawyer. During the Civil War, he paid a Polish immigrant $150 to serve as his substitute so he could work and support his family. He became sheriff of Erie County in 1871. In 1881, he became mayor of Buffalo and fought corruption and waste of public money in street cleaning and sewer contracts. In 1883, he was elected governor of New York, and in 1884, U.S. president. He opposed the free coinage of silver as inflationary. He kept Frederick Douglass as recorder of deeds for Washington, D.C., despite Douglass being a Republican, which alienated Democrats. Grover Cleveland helped Indians, American Indians. On June 2nd, 1886, he married 21-year-old Frances Folsom when he was 49. In the Pullman Railway workers' strike, he opposed the strike to get the mail delivered. He retired to Princeton, New Jersey, where he died. The author of this book, John M. Pafford, wrote, quote, "No American president exceeded Grover Cleveland's devotion to principle and political courage. Yet today, Cleveland is remembered, if at all, as a historical curiosity, the only president to have served non-consecutive terms. One of the most compelling characters ever to have occupied the White House, a leader whose unflinching stands for free enterprise and limited constitutional government are a beacon in the political tempest of our own time. He vetoed more bills than all his predecessors combined, usually on the grounds that Congress had acted without clear warrant from the Constitution, or that it was spending more than prudence justified. He was one of the most upright and trustworthy men in public life. His honesty was of the undeviating type, which never compromised an inch. His courage was immense, rugged, unconquerable, under storms that would have bent any man of lesser strength, and plowed straight forward, never flinching, always following the path that his conscience approved to the end. Republicans have ignored him because he was a Democrat. Democrats downplayed his administration because he governed like a modern Republican. A man of solid Christian faith, honesty, courage, common sense, and ability, Grover Cleveland deserves to be remembered and hailed as one of the best American presidents. So that's quite an endorsement by the author. God bless Grover Cleveland, a man who served his country well. Very interesting fellow, and I think the point he makes about how Democrats don't want to talk about him because he was conservative, and Republicans don't want to talk about him because he was a Democrat. So, yeah, based on all this information, it appears that Grover Cleveland was a man who believed in doing the right thing. He was a politician, had to deal with politics, political realities, but he believed in doing the right thing, and this is what I believe very, very much. The next book is Hitler, A Biography by Ian Kershaw, 1998. This book has 969 pages. It's a biography of Adolf Hitler. Wow, what a book. Hitler was born in 1889, died in 1945. He was Austrian-born, the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi for short. He was Chancellor and Führer, or leader of Germany, from 1934 to 1945. Hitler promoted German pride and hatred of Jews and communists. He dragged all of Europe into World War II, in which 25 million people were murdered and 30 million died from the war itself. Hitler's power was based on human weaknesses, this is my opinion: pride, arrogance, greed, cruelty, and fear. He loved the opera of Richard Wagner and admired Frederick the Great. There's a quote from the book, Ian Kershaw's words, quote, "He admired Joseph Stalin's brutality. The Soviet dictator, he thought, was, quote, one of the greatest living human beings, one of the most extraordinary figures of world history, who scarcely left his office but could rule from there through a subservient bureaucracy. He had learned his method from the atrocities of Genghis Khan. Europe has never known such a calamity to her civilization. Never in history has ruination, physical and moral, been associated with the name of one man. The chief instigator of the most profound collapse of civilization in modern times, the extreme form of personal rule which an ill-educated beer hall demagogue and racist bigot, a narcissistic megalomaniac, self-styled national savior, was allowed to acquire in a modern, economically advanced and cultured land known for its philosophers and poets, was absolutely decisive in the terrible unfolding of events in those fateful 12 years. Adolf Hitler was the chief inspiration of a genocide, the like of which the world has never known." So anyway, it's a very troubling topic, Adolf Hitler. If you believe in God's perfect justice, then all of the suffering that Europeans went through, there was a lot of bad karma burned by those people. And, there's always good in everything, and I believe that Adolf Hitler helped the world become less racist because no one wanted to be like the Nazis after the war. And again, I think, there's a tendency to say, oh, all of this trouble was caused by one man. I don't believe that's true. I think that, what Adolf Hitler did was allow evil to manifest. If you look at the Holocaust, for example, the 6 million Jewish people who were arrested and murdered. Well, why did that happen? I think a big part of it was confiscation of their property. There was a lot of wealth among Jewish citizens in Europe, and it was just a way of confiscating their property and also eliminating business competition for those who were competing in business with them, because their businesses were closed. And, that you hear talk of anti-Semitism, which is basically anti-Jewish sentiments, which sadly is very strong in the Muslim world. But I consider myself a pro-Semitic. The culture. We're all born into a family, and we're also born into a culture. And culture is just simply the actions and behavior of large groups of people based on the country you're born in, and the ethnic group, the religion, and so forth. And the Jewish people work hard, and they believe in education. They have a good sense of humor, and they achieve. They're an achieving people. And then you had these Europeans who are jealous of their success, basically. And I think so jealousy is a real problem in life. And this is my opinion, that Adolf Hitler allowed evil to manifest. But, here the United States was fought against Nazi Germany, and then as a result of that experience, see, we realized the Nazis were racist. They were never going to conquer the world. They didn't have a seductive philosophy because they believed in German superiority, not white superiority, but German superiority. That they were superior. They were very much. They taught that the Russians were an inferior people, the Slavic people, obviously the Jewish people, and so forth. So this was not going to be appealing. They were very racist. They were against. They thought Africans were, or they believed Africans were inferior. So this was never going to be popular worldwide. And then after the war, Americans thought, my God, we're racist, and it's wrong. So I think it really helped Americans to change our culture and stop being racist. Now the thing is, during the war, the real enemy, or the most dangerous enemy, I think, was the Soviet Union, because the communist philosophy isn't racist. It's very appealing. It's very international. All cultures are welcome. And women achieve equal status. And the problem is everyone's enslaved in a communist country. So anyway, this is an interesting topic. Adolf Hitler, his life, and it's very shocking what because the German people, they were a very talented people. They had won the most Nobel Prizes of any country, and they believed in education as much as any country. They're very highly educated people, and the fact that they would end up supporting, of course not all of them, but enough Germans supported Hitler that he was in power 12 years and created all this suffering and misery and death. So it's very troubling how that could have happened. But I think that it probably could happen in any country, because evil is seductive and attractive, and that's all it was. And Hitler, appealed to Germans who were depressed by losing the First World War, and he appealed to their national pride that they were, which is, it's good to believe in your country, but it was just carried too far. You shouldn't be, he went to the point where, we're superior to everyone else and we should conquer the world and all these other countries are inferior. Well, that's not right. So it's an interesting topic and very troubling, because again this type of thing can happen simply because of the evil in every human being, and that's why we have to fight the war in our own personal lives against evil and become and change for the better, and reduce the evil in our characters, become more kind and patient and humble and so forth, and reduce anger and jealousy and hatred and laziness and so forth. So very, very interesting topic. The next book is The Presidency of Benjamin Harrison by Homer E. Sokolovsky and Alan B. Spetter, 1987. Benjamin Harrison was born in 1833, died in 1901, and he was the 23rd U.S. president, so he served between Grover Cleveland's two terms. Those two are, as they're considered, two presidencies. He was elected in 1888 and served one term from 1889 to 1893. He was the grandson of William Henry Harrison, the 9th U.S. president. Ben Harrison was an Indianapolis, Indiana lawyer. He actually was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but became an Indiana person, made Indiana his home. During his presidency, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed to fight monopolies. Harrison promoted national forests. He modernized the Navy and had an active foreign policy. He promoted unsuccessfully voting rights and education for African Americans. He was born in North Bend, Ohio, in the Cincinnati area, the second of 8 children. He graduated from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio in 1852. He was very active in the Presbyterian Church. Harrison married Carolyn Scott, and they had 2 children, Russell and Mamie. During the Civil War, he became a brevet brigadier general and was involved in battles with William T. Sherman in Sherman's Atlanta, Georgia campaign. He was U.S. Senator from Indiana from 1881 to 1887. He promoted pensions for Civil War veterans. That's very good. In 1888, he was the Republican presidential nominee and defeated the incumbent Grover Cleveland in the election. He ran a front porch campaign from his Indianapolis home. In other words, people came to him to hear his speeches because it was considered unseemly for candidates to travel around the country campaigning. There was a 79% voter turnout in 1888. Boy, that's a lot more than today. Harrison was the centennial president. In other words, he was elected when our country, he took office 100 years after 1789, which was the beginning of George Washington's presidency. At 5 feet 6 inches, he was slightly taller than James Madison, the shortest president. So he's pretty short. He was the fourth and final president to sport a full beard. After that, William Howard Taft had a mustache. Theodore Roosevelt had a mustache, after that, I think that everyone was clean shaven. Benjamin Harrison said this, quote, "The colored people, in other words, African Americans, did not intrude themselves upon us. They were brought here in chains and held in communities where they are now chiefly bound by a cruel slave code. When and under what conditions is the black man to have a free ballot? When is he in fact to have those full civil rights which have been so long his in law?" So you see, it was good. He was fighting for African Americans, although there wasn't enough political consensus for what he wanted, equal rights to happen. In 1890, the Battle of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, took place, the last major American Indian battle. Harrison was the first president to have electricity in the White House. Yeah, they had the lights on, and he was afraid. They ended up sleeping all night with the lights on, electric lights on, because he was afraid if they turned it off, they'd get electrocuted. He helped the United States become a naval power. He concluded reciprocal trade treaties with 8 Latin American countries. He sent Frederick Douglass as the U.S. ambassador to Haiti. He established a 3-power protectorate in Samoa with the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany. That's Samoa's in the Pacific Ocean. When European countries banned American pork, Harrison helped establish the Meat Inspection Act to allay fears of dangerous pork. The U.S. came close to war with Chile during his presidency. Some Americans were killed there, and Harrison used the U.S. Navy to gain respect. Harrison worked hard for American annexation of Hawaii. 6 states joined the U.S. during his presidency: North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Washington State, Idaho, and Wyoming. Harrison's wife, Caroline, died on October 25, 1892, 2 weeks before the election, when Harrison lost to Grover Cleveland. When he lost to Grover Cleveland, he didn't care, so they ran against each other. In 88, Harrison had won against Cleveland. In 92, Cleveland beat him. Anyway, he didn't care about losing his re-election attempt because his wife had just died. In 1900, Harrison worked as the lawyer for Venezuela in their territorial dispute with British Guyana in South America. Regarding this biography, Richard E. Welch wrote, quote, "The authors persuasively argue the importance of the Harrison presidency as a prelude to American expansionism in the McKinley era." Lewis L. Gould wrote, quote, "In this thorough and well-researched volume, Harrison's contributions to administrative efficiency, a more assertive foreign policy. This study will stimulate new interest in an underrated chief executive." Harrison's weaknesses were in people skills. He was kind of, he was a hard worker, a smart guy, but not that comfortable, in the social settings. And, he could make friends, but he wasn't a big people person, which made things, made things hard for him as a politician. However, he was a good man and served his country well. God bless Benjamin Harrison, who was a U.S. president elected in 1888. The next book is William McKinley and His America by H. Wayne Morgan, 2003. It's a fairly recent book. It's outstanding. I really enjoyed this. William McKinley was the 25th U.S. president, born on January 29, 1843, and died September 14, 1901. He was president from March of 1897 to September of 1901. Elected in 1896, re-elected in 1900. He served only 6 months of his second term because he was shot and killed. He led the U.S. to victory in 1898 in the Spanish-American War, which brought in Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the U.S. He was the last president to serve who was a Civil War veteran. After the Civil War, he settled in Canton, Ohio, became a lawyer, and married Ida Saxton. In 1876, he was elected to Congress. He was elected Ohio governor in 1891 and re-elected in 1893. His close advisor was Cleveland businessman Mark Hanna, whose brother actually played for the Cleveland Forest City baseball team. In the 1896 election, he defeated the Democratic nominee William Jennings Bryan. McKinley again also ran a front porch campaign from his Canton, Ohio home, which is actually also the home of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The economy prospered during his presidency. He annexed Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and Guam and acquired Cuba and the Philippines. In 1900, he defeated William Jennings Bryan again. On September 6, 1901, he was shot in Buffalo, New York by anarchist Leon Czolgosz and died 8 days later. His vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, succeeded him. McKinley was very personable, smart, honest, hardworking, and popular. He was born in Niles, Ohio, the seventh child in his family. He became a pious Methodist. In 1852, his family moved to Poland, Ohio. During the Civil War, McKinley was involved in many battles and was an officer. At Antietam, Maryland, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, McKinley, by his own initiative, brought food and refreshments under heavy fire to the frontline soldiers. He was married in 1871, and William McKinley fathered 2 daughters, and they both died by age 2, so that was hard. He didn't have any children that were able to grow up. His wife, Ida, became sick and depressed for the rest of her life. Never got over that, the death of her 2 daughters. There were no more children. As a lawyer, William McKinley defended coal miners who were arrested after a clash with strike breakers. This earned him labor support. As president, he promoted tariffs to protect industry. He annexed Wake Island in the Pacific Ocean on July 12, 1898. He's on the $500 bill, which doesn't get much use. McKinley's greatest achievement, in my opinion, was bringing the United States to Guam, Puerto Rico, and especially the Philippines. The friendship between Filipinos and Americans, in my opinion, has been mutually beneficial. McKinley said this, quote, "We have the broadest opportunity for advancement with every door open. The humblest citizen among you may aspire to the highest place in public favor and confidence." The author of this book wrote, quote, William McKinley's power lay in persuasion rather than in force. He was deft in telling people things they did not know or did not want to hear. He proclaimed the end of diplomatic and economic isolation, called for international cooperation, and insisted America accept a role in world affairs. William McKinley said this, quote, "That's all a man can hope for during his lifetime, to set an example, and when he is dead, to be an inspiration for history." The author of this biography, Morgan, wrote, quote, "He is remembered. His name is familiar nearly everywhere in his beloved Ohio. The McKinley carnation is the Buckeye State's flower, and his statue stands in many of her cities and towns." Emilio Aguinaldo, who led Philippine forces in the Filipino-American War and lost, eventually decided it was a good thing the United States came to the Philippines. 1898 was the colonial era, and either Japan or Germany would have taken the Philippines. God bless William McKinley, a man who served his country well. Yeah, a very interesting topic. William McKinley, he actually prayed about the Philippines, about what to do about it, and believed that the United States should take that country. And it's still controversial. I know Filipinos who are into history feel, it was terrible that the U.S. came, because Filipinos didn't get independence. But like I said, and it was very tragic, the war, the Filipino-American War, in which large numbers of Filipinos died. And Filipinos were very disappointed they did not become independent. but I don't think they were ready because the Spanish hadn't prepared them. And running your country is tough. Democracy is a tough thing to do. So I think, and I believe that when the U.S. took the Philippines, that it was the beginning of a strong relationship between Americans and Filipinos, where we help each other. The United States has helped the Philippines in terms of materially developing the infrastructure, public schools, hospitals, and also the mechanics of democracy, because Americans are a can-do people. Filipinos, on the other hand, large numbers are in the U.S. today, and they play a very important role in the United States today because they have this patience and joy and sense of humor and are hardworking people and very, very helpful in the roles they play, especially as nurses and as caregivers for the elderly and as teachers, because these are professions that really, when you're sick and in the hospital, you need someone to be kind to you, and they have that kindness. And they have that joy, that they became English speakers because of the American influence. And now they're all over the world, especially in the Middle East, where they play a very important role, I think, in helping that troubled region with their smiles and patience and joy and spirituality and sense of humor. So it's a very interesting topic. William McKinley is not, this is something I need to do. I've never been to his home. It's not far from where I'm living here in the Cleveland area in Canton, Ohio. The next book is The Cleveland Cavaliers, A History of the Wine and Gold by Vince McKee, 2014. Excuse me. I really enjoyed this book. The story of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were established in 1970. So it's been now, 48 years. And 1976, I have fond memories. They made it to the East Finals. They were playing at what was called the Richfield Coliseum, which is between Cleveland and Akron. And in 1992, got to the East Finals. And of course, LeBron James, his era, starting in 2003, made it to the NBA Finals in 2007. And of course, when his departure in 2010, and then his return in 2014. Now his departure again, which is unfortunate. All these interesting people. Nick Maletti, the founder of the Cavs back in 1970. Bill Fitch, the first coach who got the Cavs in 1976, where they made it to the East Finals. And very unfortunately, Jim Jones, the starting center, broke his foot in practice. We ended up losing to the Celtics in 6. Yeah, could have won the finals that year. Austin Carr, who they call him Mr. Cavalier, he's on TV. He does Cavs games up till now. He was on that 76 team. Bingo Smith, I'm talking about the 76 Cavs. Campy Russell, the Coliseum. Footsie Walker. Jim Jones, who is does Cavs games on the radio. Dick Snyder. Nate Thurmond. Mark Price. World Be Free. This is a little bit later. Walt Frazier. It was the great New York Knick, and who loved the New York City nightlife. And then he was traded to Cleveland, was playing the Coliseum, where you go out of the Coliseum. It's in the middle of the country. No nightlife in Richfield, Ohio. Brad Daugherty, now we're getting into the late 80s when the Cavs were a contender. Hot Rod Williams, Craig Elo, Lenny Wilkins, LeBron James, Mo Williams, Boobie Gibson, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Timothy Mozgov, David Blatt, Tyronn Lue, all forever embedded in our hearts. So this Vince McKee did a good job, A History of the Cavaliers. Really enjoyed this book, and it's an ongoing saga. It's all very interesting. It appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.